Great to have you all here this morning. My name's Toby. I'm one of the pastors here. And we're looking at this topic, God, why aren't you more obvious? It's a great question. Many years ago, I heard a parable told by a very famous atheist, Anthony Flew. And he told a parable about two travelers that were walking through a jungle. They stumbled upon a garden in the middle of the jungle. And it had manicured lawns, it had hedges, it had an orchard full of fruit trees. And the first guy said to the other, there must be a gardener here. And the second guy said, there's no gardener, we're in the middle of nowhere. There's no one around, it's just us. This just happened. And the first guy goes, no, this couldn't have just happened, there must be a gardener. And so they pitch a tent and they camp out there and they waited and they watched for the gardener to arrive. But the gardener never showed up. And so the second guy says, see, I told you there is no gardener. But the first guy goes, no, what if the gardener is invisible? And so they put up a barbed wire fence with like security things. What do you call it? I don't know. Zzz. What do you call those things? Lasers. Sensors, thank you. They got some guard dogs that could smell invisible people, and they kept watch. They watched, they waited, but no sign of the gardener appeared. The alarms didn't go off, the dogs didn't bark, no gardener arrived. And the first guy looks at the second guy and he goes, well, maybe he's invisible, intangible. Maybe you can't touch him. Maybe you can't smell him. Maybe you can't see him. He's mysterious. But all of this didn't just happen. And the second guy goes, how is that any different to no gardener at all? Like if you can't see him, touch him, smell him, how is that different from no gardener at all? And it's a very, very interesting parable, don't you think? Written by an atheist at the time, Anthony Flew, one of the most significant atheists of the 20th century, about why he doesn't believe in God. Because all these Christians are like, look at the world, there must be a God. And he's like, what? Where is he? I can't see him, smell him, touch him. What's going on? And today we're asking that very question, which is, why doesn't God make himself more obvious? Why does it feel like God's invisible? Why does it sometimes feel like we watch and we wait and he doesn't show up? And that's the question. At the start of winter, we actually surveyed our friends who don't yet follow Jesus. And we asked them this question, what's your biggest question for God? And the top three answers were, why aren't you more obvious? What happens when I die? And what's the purpose of my life? We had a bunch of people respond, and you would have seen the video as well. We went out to the streets and asked people of Surry Hills. And these are the top three. And so over the next 3 weeks, we're going to be addressing these questions and seeing what the Bible has to answer on them. And today, that's the question, why isn't God more obvious? And the Bible actually says it's not a stupid question, because in our reading, this is what we read, no one has ever seen God because God is invisible. And that's because he is spirit. He is not flesh and blood like you and I. He doesn't have a face, hands, legs, and arms like you and I, so you can't see him even if you wanted to see him. He is invisible. He doesn't have a face. And so he's not something within the creation. He is the creator over the creation, and that's why he's invisible and cannot be seen. And that, therefore, leaves you with a problem, because if invisible, how will you ever know him? And maybe you're in that situation today where you're like, I'm open to believing in God, but like, where's the evidence? How would I even know that he exists if I can't see him, touch him, smell him, or listen to him? How might I even know him? And that's what we're going to look at today. Where's the evidence that God exists in the world that we live in? And we're going to look at 5 pieces of evidence that we have that show us that no, there is a God and we can know him. And the first piece of evidence is this, the unexplained Big Bang. Now, in 1948, there was a very famous debate between Bertrand Russell, the greatest atheist of the 20th century, and Frederick Copplestone, a Roman Catholic priest and an Oxford philosopher. And there was a debate in Oxford between these two, and Bertrand Russell, he argued that the universe is eternal and uncreated. That was the scientific consensus of the day, that the universe had no beginning, and because it had no beginning, it was not created, And because it was not created, there is no creator, there is no God. And Bertrand Russell, 1948, he won the debate square and fair. But then in the 1960s, something changed, where it became increasingly clear to scientists that the universe did have an origin, which became known as the Big Bang. And so here is Stephen Hawking, not a Christian, not a believer in God, but he said almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang. Many people don't like the idea that time has a beginning, probably because it smacks of divine intervention. He's very honest. He's not a believer, and he realizes that when you come to the scientific consensus that the universe had a beginning, that is fairly good evidence that someone caused that beginning. It has a divine, it's as a result of a design consequence. So that's what he's saying. Now, this is Francis Collins, who was the head of the Human Genome Project, one of the most significant medical scientists of the 20th and 21st century. He discovered a number of genes, the cause of a lot of diseases. So bright guy, and he became a Christian in the middle of his life from this scientific skeptical background, and he explained how he became a Christian in his book, The Language of God. And in an interview where he's asked about that book, notice what he says. He says, "I can't imagine how nature, in this case the universe, could have created itself. And the very fact that the universe had a beginning implies that someone was able to begin it, and it seems to me that that had to be outside of nature, and that sounds like God." He comes to the conclusion that many other skeptical, intelligent scientists come to, that nothing comes from nothing. Everything that exists has a cause. It's only kids that believe things can pop out of mid-air, out of nothing, into something, and that's why they love magic. So I've got a magic trick for you today, all right? You want to see a magic trick? All right, for real, we're going to do a magic trick. You're like, oh, we do it. We are. All right, I've got 2 magic tricks for you, actually, and Liv said, just do one. But my hidden desire in life was to grow up and be a magician, so I got 2. I'm not very good, but here's one magic trick, right? No, there's just a little vase, but if I put the lid on, click my fingers, look what happens. The little ball pops out, but if I click my fingers again, disappears, and where has it gone to? Come on. All right, you want to see another magic trick? All right, so here's number 2. Here's number 2, an empty box, nothing in there, yeah? Nothing in there. If I close the box, click my fingers, look what's in there, a bunch of cockroaches. That one didn't get as good. I should have thrown it on you, shouldn't I? That one didn't work so good. I think I'm a better preacher than a magician, but anyway, thank you guys. So when my kids were like 1 or 2, they're like, wow, that really happened. As soon as they got to 3, they realized Dad's fudging, Dad's doing something there, right? And what's interesting is many adults, although it's very naive for kids to think stuff just happens out of nowhere, many adults still believe the universe just appeared, unexplained, uncaused, from nothing, and that's as naive as a kid at a magic show, because every part of life we know comes from something. Nothing comes from nothing. There's an effect. Every effect has a cause, and that's exactly what the Bible says. The Bible, in our reading, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. So before there was space and time, there was a word, the Logos, a reason, a mind, a persona, a rational being who wasn't made, but through whom everything was made. And that's the first clue from science, the origin of the Big Bang. The second clue to the evidence of God is the fine-tuning of the universe. The question is the universe that we're living in, is it a cosmic accident? Or as you look at the universe and the world in which we live, is this what you'd expect if God had chosen to create a place for those he loves? Does the world and the universe show evidence that it's been carefully curated and designed by a loving God? Now, here's Francis Collins again. Listen to what he says. He says, when you look from the perspective of a scientist at the universe, it looks as if it knew we were coming. There are 15 constants: the gravitational constant, various constants about strong and weak nuclear forces that have precise values. If any one of those constants was off by even 1 part in a million, or in some cases by 1 part in a million, the universe could not have actually come to the point where we see it. Matter would not have been able to coalesce. There would have been no galaxy, no stars, no planets or people. Now, this is called the fine-tuning argument, and as you study the world, there are these particular constants like gravity, speed of light, strong and weak nuclear forces, which if any one of them was off by just a little bit, we wouldn't have life. And you need all 15 of these to be so finely tuned, so working together, that if you did not have them together, life would not exist. I'd love to go into the science of this, but we don't have time. But there are a couple of great books on the that we're giving away to those of you who are exploring these things. One's by Oxford mathematician John Lennox, and the other's by Tim Keller. And there's a couple of these arguments in there, and they'll footnote to longer arguments for these things. But this is, Collins, he's a Christian, so maybe you'd expect, of course he's going to say that. But here's Stephen Hawking again, not a believer, and he recognizes the probability of the universe being so finely tuned like this is very unlikely. He said the odds against the universe like ours emerging out of something like the Big Bang are enormous, like a universe like ours with life sustaining. I think there are clearly religious implications. It would be very difficult to explain why the universe would have begun in just this way, except as the act of a God who intended to create beings like us. Now, he's not a Christian, not religious, but he admits that science points you in the direction that the universe is remarkably prepared for human life. It's either a remarkable stroke of luck or the product of a God who cares and designed it for us. But it's not just the realm of science that pushes us in this direction. It's also the realm of beauty, because if you ever looked up into the night sky filled with stars, or stood on the edge of the ocean, or heard a piece of music so moving and thought, this can't just be atoms and chance. Beauty is not necessary for survival, and yet our world is saturated with it. Color, harmony, rhythm, order, grandeur. Here's country music singer Casey Musgraves, and in one of her songs, I don't think she's a believer, but she wonders, even something as small as an apple, it's simple and somehow complex, sweet and divine, the perfect design, can I speak to the architect? Now, I don't think she's a believer, but she can't help but think someone designed even an apple. It makes sense. There's a structure, an order, a beauty to the world we live in. It can't just be an accident. There must be an architect. And that's what the Bible says in our reading. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. The fine-tuned universe, it's not a cosmic accident. It's the result of a personal creator, a word, a logic, a reason, a mind behind the cosmos, but present in it. And he makes it and he sustains it. This is what it goes on to say, the Bible. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. So the one who finally tuned the universe stepped into it. The architect walked on the floor of his own cathedral. The designer became part of the design. That's the claim of Jesus Christ. He is God come to live with us. And it's not just a scientific argument that, look, a creator has finally tuned the universe. It's a personal argument, because you are not a cosmic accident. Your life has meaning. You were created by a God who loves you, and he made you for a reason. Your life is not meaningless. And so the second clue to the existence of God is the fine-tuning of the universe and God's design, even down to the details of your life. He made you, and he sustains every moment of your life. That's the second clue. The third clue is this, the existence of right and wrong. 5 clues we're looking at. The third clue, the existence of right and wrong. Or in other words, the existence of moral obligation. Now, what do I mean by that? Let me give you an example. Imagine that you'd never seen a watch before. You didn't know what a watch was, what a watch was designed for, and I gave you an Apple Watch. And you'd never seen one of these before, you don't know how they work, and you don't know what they are for, and you're given one and you're sitting in your living room. This doesn't mean anything to you, but you've got an artwork that you want hung on the wall, and you have a nail, but you don't have a hammer, and you look at this and you're like, well, it's harder than my hand. I can't hammer the nail into the wall with my hand, so I'll use this. And you start hammering the nail into the wall with this. And no surprise, it shatters into a bunch of pieces. Now, when that happens, when it shatters after hammering a nail into a wall, would you call that a bad watch? Would you? No, that would be stupid to call it a bad watch, because the purpose of a watch is not to hammer nails into the wall, but the purpose of an Apple Watch is to tell time and to tell your heart rate and to, do all manner of other things. That's the purpose of it. And if you use it for a use other than that purpose, don't blame the watch for being bad. You're the idiot that don't know what the purpose of the watch is for. Now, here's why this is an important a concept to grasp hold of. If you don't know the purpose something is created for, or if something is not created for any purpose, then you cannot say it's good or it's bad. It just is. And so why were you made? Were you made? Does the universe have any intention in putting you here? If there is no God, you have no purpose. You're not made for anything. And therefore, there is no right or wrong for you. You just are. If there's no God, no creator with a purpose, there's no objective way to say that this person is good or this behavior is good and this behavior is bad. We're left to invent our own purpose, define our own meaning, and decide our own morality. But by doing so, you abandon any real standard beyond yourself. So if you don't believe that people are created for a purpose by a God who made them, there's no way for you to evaluate whether a behavior is good or bad. And what you're reduced to is what philosophers call emotivism, which is a word that describes morality based on intuitions and feelings. And that's the dominant ethical framework in our world today. You see a guy like Alex O'Connor, the cosmic skeptic, who's all over YouTube at the moment. He's the most significant atheist debating Christians right now. And I like him. He's good-natured and he takes the issue seriously in a way that the old atheists like Dawkins didn't. But he's great. But this is his view. He's an ethical emotivist. And the reason for that is when there is no God, then there's no external reference point that you can point to decide what is good and what is not good. The reference point, if there's nothing out there, then it's all in here. It's within our emotions. And when you become emotivists, a society of emotivists, it's no surprise when there's ethical disagreement in the culture, it becomes a shouting match. Because we yell our morality at each other because we have nothing external and objective to appeal to. And so all we've got is our emotions, and so we just scream them at one another because there is no external standard by which we judge each other's moral frameworks. So without God, you have no basis for moral obligation. I'm not saying without God, you can't be good. Of course you can be good. As a Christian, I believe you can be good whether you have God in your life, and the reason for that is because God made you in his image. And he's written his law upon your heart. He's given you a conscience. So of course you can be good. That's not what we're arguing about. The issue is Without God, there is no objective reference point to ground your moral intuitions. You might feel like racism and rape are evil, but what if someone else says, I don't feel it is? You end up in this game of, will I say, will you say, will I say, will you say? Like, well, who gets to decide? Oh, so society gets to decide. But society gets it wrong all the time. Just look back on history. And so we need a moral norm outside of us to judge our moral intuitions and to set our moral intuitions so that we can be drawn back to them. And that's the third clue to the reality of God, the existence of right and wrong. And so here's what the Bible says. It says, in the beginning was the Word, in him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. You see, the reason we long for justice, the reason we recoil at evil, the reason we believe in dignity and human rights and goodness is because there is a light, there is a source, and you were made to walk in the light. And that light's not merely a moral idea or a philosophical concept, it's a person. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. That's the claim, that Jesus, the light of the world, stepped into the world. But here's the tension. Later on in John's Gospel, we read, this is the verdict, light has come into the world, but people love darkness instead of light. We all sense there is a right and wrong, but we don't always live in the light. We resist it because it exposes us and it humbles us and it calls us to the position that I am not in control of my life. I answer to someone else, and we don't like that. And so we stay in the dark. But for those who come into the light, they step into the truth. Whoever lives by the truth comes into the light so that it may be seen plainly that what they have done has been done in the sight of God. God hasn't left us guessing. He has come. Jesus, the true light, is sent into the world. And not only do we see him, but he draws us back to the standard of right and wrong, light and dark. So here's one final illustration before we move on. Imagine you're in an orchestra and it sounds terrible because no one's tuned to the right key. And the violinist tunes to the flute, the trumpet to the cello, and everyone's trying to match the person next to each other, but everyone's out of tune, but everyone's tuning to the guy next to them who's out of tune. And it doesn't work, and you sound out of tune. The only way to get harmony is for everyone to tune to something outside of themselves, a fixed note. And that's what the oboe does. The oboe tunes to a tuning fork or something like that, and then everyone else tunes to the oboe. Only then can the music make sense. And that's how it is with morality. If we all just tune in to our own inner sense of right and wrong, or if we just tune to the person next to us or our culture at large, we will always be out of tune. We need something beyond us, a fixed standard. And the Bible says there is a standard. God is light. In him there is no darkness at all. And he's come into the world that we might know the light. That's the third clue to the existence of God, the existence of right and wrong. All right, the fourth clue is this, the centrality of love. Now, I wonder how you're going with this, tracking. If you're a skeptical person or you're doubting, love for you to be writing down your questions. Head over to Slido, the website, and you can type in any of your questions during this. The code is VINE. Okay, the fourth clue is the existence of love. That is a clue to the existence of God in our world. Now, think about it. If there is no God, then you and I, we're just atoms bouncing around, products of blind chance, and love is merely a chemical reaction in your brain. The rush you feel when you fall in love, it's just oxytocin. And the ache you feel when someone leaves you, that's just dopamine withdrawal. So the next time you fall in love and you're like, oh, I love this person so much, just say, hey, it's just oxytocin. Nothing special going on here. And the next time someone breaks your heart, just like, nothing special going on. It's just dopamine withdrawal. It's okay. We don't act that way, do we? Because we do believe we are more than mere chemicals. Deep down, we know the most meaningful experiences of life are our relationships. To hold a child's hand, to be forgiven, to walk through grief with someone. They aren't just chemical, they're meaningful, they're significant. Now, why would that be the case? Why would relationships be at the heart of ultimate reality? Well, it's because at the center of all reality is a God who is personal and relational. Jesus reveals God to us as a Father who loves the Son, and the Holy Spirit as the bond of love between them. That there is one God, but that God is a community of three persons bound together in a relationship of love. That's what Jesus teaches. And so before the universe was made, before time began, God didn't learn love, he was love, because the Father has always loved the Son. And that's one of the most unique and beautiful things about Christianity. That the Christian God is not a lone, solitary force of raw power that demands submission. He is a triune God overflowing with life and love. And we get a glimpse of that in our passage this morning. Did you see it? No one has ever seen God, but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in closest relationship with the Father, who is also God, has made him known. See, the universe is not built on power or the survival of the fittest. You know, if there is no God, the universe is, and you should do whatever is good for you, but we don't live that way. We actually think sacrificing our needs for the good of others is a worthy thing to do. The most basic truth of all reality is love, because God is love. And that's why when our relationships are going well, it feels like heaven. And when our relationships aren't going well, it feels like hell. I'll give you an example. Some of you heard me share this last year, but let me give you an example. Start of last year, I went on long service leave, and the end of our long service leave was up at Byron Bay, and we're staying at Broken Head Caravan Park in our caravan. Beautiful place, and I've been wanting to there are 4 beaches south of Broken Head, and I wanted to go and visit all of them. And so I said, kids, wife, we're going on a walk. And the first beach was a nudist beach. So my kids were really excited to go on the first. And that first one, there was a nice paved park. It was very easy to get there. And when we get there, it was spectacular. Dolphins jumping out of the waves. The water was crystal clear. No one was nude, which was good. But one of us wasn't particularly happy. And I'll let you guess who that was. We then jumped in. We got back, jumped in the car, drove to the walking track to get to beach 2. But here there was no walking track, and we had to scramble down this cliff. And it was quite difficult. The path was wet and slippery. We were wearing thongs, which is slippers for those of you who are from a different country, not other thongs. But anyway, we had sandals on, jandals, whatever you call them in other countries. And it was very difficult. But we got to the bottom, and it was spectacular. Rock pools, really, we were in paradise. And then we had to walk back up the cliff, and not everyone was particularly happy. And it was tricky because it was very slippery. We're slipping, we're sliding, and it was very difficult. But eventually we got up the mountain. It was very difficult, and we climbed the cliff. And just before we got up to the car, we then turned left to go to beach number 3. And at that moment, can I tell you, there was a little bit of inertia in the Neal family. My daughter Maisie had realized she had a bunch of leeches on her toes, and she's screaming. She's like, "Dad, I can't do this." And she's like, "Please, can I just sit in the car?" And I'm like, "Nah, lock the car door. We're going." Beach number 3. So there we are. We're walking down beach number 3 when it starts raining, and we're brushing up against all of this stuff on the sides. We're getting wet. We're getting cold. And that's when the wheels started to fall off the bus, because we then came upon a path with a dead toad in it, and then another dead toad, and then another 3 dead toads. And my kids are like, "Dad, I can't keep going." And then we're walking through, the path narrows, and there's very tall grass on either side. And my wife has a phobia about snakes, and she's absolutely terrified a snake's going to jump out and attack her. And she says to me, "Please, Toby, it's raining, it's wet, it's slippery, there are toads, there are snakes. Are you really going to make us do this?" And I said, "Yep, we're going." Not my finest moment, but we ended up down in paradise on this headland looking over the water. I was loving life. But my family weren't. And at that point, I conceded defeat. We walked back up to the car, and we spent the rest of the day in our small caravan giving each other the silent treatment. And the point of that story is you can be in paradise, but if your relationships aren't going well, then you're in hell. It feels like hell. Such is the power of our relationships. You can have all the beauty in the world, but it's nothing unless you're experiencing love. And as it turns out, the Bible has a reason for that, because at the heart of reality is not a lonely God, but a community of love, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, which means the meaning of your life is not achievement, it's not success, but it's relationships. And so here's the question: how do you ground that? If there is no God, why do our relationships matter so much? Why is that the thing that gives your life meaning? The centrality of love is a clue that there's a God of love, and that love is not an illusion. It's the reason you exist. That's the 4th clue to the existence of God. 5th and finally, 5th clue is the life of Jesus Christ. Because as helpful as those 4 clues are to the existence of God, I don't think any of us believes in God or believes in Jesus because of that, ultimately. They've helped prepare me to believe in Jesus, but I don't believe in Jesus because of those things. The reason I believe in God is because of Jesus. Because if God were real and cared about us, surely you'd expect him to show up. Surely he'd make himself known. And the astonishing claim of Christianity is that God has done just that. This is what we read. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. No one has ever seen God, but the one and only Son has made him known. God didn't leave us guessing. He entered the story. He became a real person, not merely a voice in the clouds, but a man with a face and a voice, with teeth and toenails. And that's where Christianity is radically different from every other belief system, because all the other religions rely on a private, untestable revelation that a prophet or a guru gets by communing with the divine. And they have this private experience, and then they tell all of the rest of us it, and you have to take their word for it. But Christianity, it hangs on public events, that a real person, Jesus of Nazareth, at a real point of history, really lived, taught, healed, died, and rose again, and was seen by hundreds and thousands, actually, of eyewitnesses. That's not a mystical experience, it's a testable claim. Christianity invites you to come and test, did that really happen? And historians do that. They examine the ancient manuscripts for reliability. The archaeologists excavate Galilean towns to compare the geography with the Gospels. Linguists check place names and titles against non-Christian inscriptions from the day. And Christianity is not afraid of scrutiny, because this is true. Either it happened or it didn't. And so if it happened, we're not scared of the evidence. And so Christianity invites you to come and look critically. If Jesus rose from the dead, it changes everything. And if he didn't, we're wasting our time. So bring on your questions. Bring your skeptical mind, your critical mind, and evaluate whether this really did happen. Pick up a gospel for yourself. We've got them free on the back desk. And watch how Jesus moves and treats people, how he confronts religious pride, how he lifts up the broken. There's no one like him. This is what the Bible says. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world. And though the world was made through him, the world didn't recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. When he arrived, we didn't recognize him. We didn't receive him. We rejected him. And so what kind of proof would be enough for a person to believe in God? The claim is that what if the gardener really did show up? What if he really did enter the garden in flesh and blood? And what if he loved the unlovable? He healed the sick. He opened blind eyes. And he told us the truth about ourselves and about God. And what if he claimed that the garden's his, not ours, but he claimed it as his, not to take it away from us, but to teach us about what life in the garden actually looks like? And what if he really revealed the very heart of God, full of grace and truth? And what if he jumps the fence, comes into the garden, doing all that, and what if not only we don't ignore him, but what if we killed him? That's the claim of Christianity, that the God who made the world entered the world, and not only did people reject him, they crucified him. Not because there wasn't enough evidence, but because there was, that he spoke too clearly. He spoke too truthfully. He loved too genuinely. And they killed him for it. And yet, he rises again. And to the people who killed him, he pleads, come back, be forgiven. That's the wonder at the heart of Christianity. The invisible God became visible. The Word became flesh. The author stepped into the play. The gardener stepped into the garden to bring us home. And notice how John describes him. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. I love that phrase, grace and truth. He wasn't half grace, half truth. He was full grace, full truth. He wasn't gracious, but with no backbone. He wasn't truthful, but without compassion. He embodied both in perfect measure. In Jesus, we see the justice and love of God. No one ever spoke like him. No one ever lived like him. The poor loved him. The proud hated him. The sick ran to him. The powerful feared him. He touched lepers. He forgave prostitutes. He silenced storms. He wept at tombs. He ate with sinners and he rose from the dead. There's no one like him. He is the image of the invisible God. He is the Word made flesh. He is full of grace and truth, and he invites you to come back to him. And yet, this is the message, that there is a strange distrust in our hearts that when he shows up to offer us grace and truth, we reject it. We reject him and we think there's an ulterior motive going on. Now, I want to finish with a story. A number of years ago, I was reading a book and told a story about a Navy SEAL team who went into a country to liberate some hostages. They'd been locked up in this dungeon, hadn't seen light, they were cowering in fear, and they burst into the dungeon to liberate these captives. And as they went in, they shouted out, "We're Americans, we're here to save you." But because they'd only been in darkness and were so afraid, they didn't respond. They couldn't respond. And so the Navy SEALs had this problem. How are we going to get these hostages out of this room? We can't drag them out. And so one of the soldiers had an idea. He took off his helmet, put down his gun, went and sat on the floor and nuzzled up very close to one of the hostages and just sat there and waited. And over time, he put his arm over the shoulder of one of the hostages. And the hostage in this moment thinking, our guards would never have done this for us. And the story goes that the eyes of some of the hostages started to lift and look into the face of this Navy SEAL. And as he saw their face, he said to them, "It's okay. We're here. We're Americans. We've come to take you home." And slowly, one by one, they began to move. One stood up, then another, until finally the whole group followed this soldier to freedom. And that's Christianity. That God steps into the world. He doesn't shout from the door. He doesn't demand we pull ourselves up together. He comes in all the way in, takes off his crown, lays aside his power, wraps himself in our flesh, sits beside us in the dust, becomes one of us so that in his voice we would hear not condemnation, but our rescuer saying to us, "Will you trust me? I've come to take you home." And yet the crazy thing is, many people still resist him. Not because he isn't good, but because we have a lie buried in our hearts, planted there by our enemy, which says he's not safe, he's not good, you can't trust him. And yet he comes full of grace and truth and speaks gently to you today, saying, "Will you trust me? I've come to take you home." There's 5 pieces of evidence for why you can know for certain God exists and he's shown up in the person of Jesus Christ. I'd love to hear your questions at this point. We're going to take a break. We'll have some background music on. You can ask your question via the website, and in 2 or 3 minutes, we'll come back to answer them. Have a chat to the person next to you. What stood out from the talk? What questions do you have? We'd love to hear from you.